Well, good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the City of York Council Planning Committee on Thursday, the 2nd of March 2023. Welcome to members. There are some changes with substitutions. So welcome to Councillor Rowley. We have apologies from Councillor Doughty. You're substituting. Welcome to Councillor Hollier. Councillor Fenton has given apologies in order to be able to register as a Fisher to speak at the meeting. Councillor Fenton is here. Who else are we missing? Yes, we don't have a substitution, but we do have apologies from Councillor Wardby. Usual housekeeping. If you do need to access toilets, please use the door through here and go on through. Also use that door. In the very unlikely event that we have some emergency, we'll be using that exit out of the main doors and gather in front of the Grand Hotel. This meeting is being webcast, so it's available for all to see, both live and subsequently. But the cameras are focused particularly on the meeting rather than on the public. However, if you do come to speak, you will then be on camera. I'll remind officers who are present, I think we only have officers who are present in the room, do introduce yourselves by name and job title when you first speak to the meeting. That would be helpful. We have both Gareth and Ian Stokes from Highways who are with us this afternoon. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any need to declare an interest? Thank you, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. It's just simply for transparency that this application before us is in my ward. It has been discussed at Parish Council, of which I am a member, but Parish Council have not made any objections to this particular application.
Thank you. I see no other declarations. Public participation. We don't have registered speakers for this general section of the meeting, so we move on to the minutes of our previous meeting. I've got a couple of things to note, if you'll allow. I did have a word when I saw the minutes to say it might be helpful if we make a point of recording as in attendance those officers who were attending remotely and not just those who were physically present in the room, particularly given that contributions were made from officers who were attending remotely. I think that gives us a better record of the meeting, and maybe it could just be recorded with these minutes, and just be sure in future that officers who are in attendance remotely are included. And further to that, when we came to the additional condition with regard to the Bootham Park Hospital, I'm referring now to page 8. At the top of that page, resolved. It refers to the additional condition acknowledging the history of the site to be publicly accessible. The wording to be not working, to be delegated to officers. We did agree to officers, chair and vice chair, and I think it would be helpful if that was recorded as such. And again, if we could be aware of that for similar situations, just to be clear. Are there, assuming members are agreeing to that, are there any other comments, or do I accept these minutes as a satisfactory record of our meeting? Thank you very much. We move on to our item for this evening, one main item on this evening's agenda, and if you would, Gareth, please, any updates and introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. This is a planning application at the J.H. Shouksmith site in Murton Way. The site is currently an industrial estate. It's a site on an existing industrial estate, I should say. Previously developed land. It's currently occupied by, was previously occupied by a commercial warehouse style building, which has been demolished, and this low 1960s era, I believe, temporary looking office building, which has been partially demolished. The proposal is for the development of a 3-story office building which faces Murton Way, which is the road to the south here. And then a separate development of light industrial buildings to the rear of the site, which would be accessed from Outgang Lane. The site is in flood zone 3. That's its only planning designation, really. So just going through the plans. So we have the proposed site plan. So the office elements here on the frontage, that's sort of shallow V shape with an element extending, partially 2-story, extending along the Outgang Lane frontage. The access, the in-out access from Murton Way, car parking provided at the back here, no parking on the frontage. And then this area of proposed commercial uses with its access from Outgang Lane, which operates as an extension of the existing light industrial units further to the north, which are within the application site, but not substantially amended by the scheme. Google Earth view gives a good overview of the site. So I'll just run around the edge of the site there with the cursor. You see the buildings which are remaining. I've got some photographs which show them from ground level. So Outgang Lane, Murton Way, Osbaldwick Link Road. And these distances is about 75 metres or so from the edge of the site to these three-story residential buildings in it's called Beckett's Close, I believe, Beckett Drive Close. And then about 65 metres to this house, which is probably the first house in Osbaldwick, I guess, as you go along Murton Way. And then commercial development, which extends southwards along the Link Road. The site plan. So just a bigger version of the one I showed you first off, showing the commercial uses, car parking, cycle parking for the light industrial, the office use here. It's cycle parking in this corner, refuse storage, and some images around the edge. Proposed elevations. So it's the elevation facing Murton Way, side elevation facing Outgang Lane, side elevation which looks towards, let's go back to that. So this elevation facing eastwards. And then the rear of the commercial uses, light industrial units, and then some visualizations below. These are the elevations of the light industrial uses. Floor plans, the ground floor plan of the office, the ground floor plan of the light industrial, first floor plan of the office, first floor plan of the light industrial, the second floor plan of the office. I think the report refers to its setback at roof level. These elements here are set back. These appear to be reasonably sheer to the floors below. Photographs. So this is just those are the retained buildings as they stand at present. The existing car parking, which will be where the office use will be, car parking provided behind. This is Murton Way. So looking westwards across the site, This is Murton Way looking eastwards. That's Heritage House in the distance there, which is referenced in, I think, one of the objection letters. Again, slightly further away. So this is Osbaldwick Link Road. So the site is just here. And then this is the junction of Outgang Lane. So looking towards the Osbaldwick village itself. That's looking up Outgang Lane. So the site's here, you just see part of the demolished warehouse buildings yet to be cleared. And there's a photograph of Heritage House as a slightly more of a close-up. There's no update apart from there appears to be a need for a condition to protect the hedgerow. So this hedgerow along here. During construction, I couldn't see reference to it in the papers. So with members' approval, if the application is approved, I'd ask for that tree protection condition to be placed on any consent.
Thank you very much. So we have 3 registered speakers. The first of those, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fisher, I think you know how this works. 3 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed for allowing me to speak. Can I first of all emphasise I'm speaking in my private capacity. My son is the owner and owner of Max Car Care, which is the tenant of Unit 7, which is on the existing part of the industrial estate, and he's asked me to speak on his behalf. He has no objections whatsoever to the principle of development. In fact, we support the principle of development. However, we have some comments about the access egress arrangements, and particularly the visibility displays on Outgang Lane. I visited there yesterday and took some photographs. There were 29 cars parked on Outgang Lane. Now, as you come out of this site, there is a dog leg to the left, and consequently, you cannot see past any parked cars. Furthermore, if you wish to go to the further access, which is the one my son normally uses, there is a wall of cars parked along there most of the day. And you simply have to go onto the wrong side of the road and trust to your luck that you're not going to run into a car coming the other way. And bearing in mind Martin skips are down there, and Martin skip lorries neither stop or give way for anybody, it is quite dangerous. The other day I was visiting the site and a car came the opposite direction and made no attempt to slow down, drove along the footpath at about 35 miles an hour. So there is a real issue. And the problem lies with Gladson's garage and the York Cars site that is there. They park cars absolutely everywhere, including on the Shouksmith site, which they have no right of access to. Whilst the principle of development is fine and the access arrangements are fine, it is vital that City of York takes some action to reduce the car parking on Outgang Lane to make it safe for the residents of that area of the industrial estate to use it safely. It simply can't go on the way it is. There have been far too many close calls, head-on collisions just avoided, people driving on the pavement at high speed because they won't slow down. It really does need to be addressed as a matter of urgency. But in principle, I support the application. I just ask Highways to do something about the issues I've highlighted. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. There may be questions from members. Councillor Pavlovic.
The cars parked.
Your microphone.
It's on.
Okay. Speak into it.
Speak into it. Thank you. It sounds like it's my first day. The cars that are parked on there, do you know if they're from the residential or from the industrial estate?
They're almost exclusively from one or two businesses which occupy the same site. It's frequently there are vehicles that have clearly been dealt with by Gladson's garage. As I went there yesterday, we were told by York Cars when they moved on to that site that it was mainly a training centre, because I was on the area planning committee at the time. We're told it's going to be mainly a training centre and visits from cars will be relatively rare. There were 4 there yesterday, including 2 minibuses. You know, so that we know where they're coming from, because a lot of them are actually sign written with the actual business. But it's not just cars that are parked on the carriageway, it's cars that are parked on the grass verges, the footpaths. It just goes on. I say, you know, it's not just for this access, it's for the further access, the one that is the current access to the main part of the industrial estate. Cars parked right on the entrance. So as you come out, you literally cannot see either way. So something needs to be done to control it, because the site is perfectly good, perfectly valid application, but it does need addressing to make sure the visibility displays are satisfactory and there is no danger to people accessing and egressing the site.
Councillor Cobain.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Fisher. And I'm just sitting here thinking it would be useful to have your expertise on this on the committee. Did you feel conflicted on this issue because of your son's?
Absolutely. There is no way I could sit on the committee. I would have had to declare in this, and that's why, because it's the only application, I decided not to even attend the committee in my capacity as a councillor. As I say, my son is too heavily involved. His site is right next to where the gap is going between the existing part of the site. It's the one just at the very top left of the diagram there. So clearly he's affected by it. So I could not sit on the committee tonight.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Fisher, I'm going to draw on your expertise, and I would say that I absolutely agree with everything you've said. As the ward councillor for this particular area, it's an ongoing issue, an ongoing concern, and my ward colleague has been very vocal in previous meetings about the developments in that area. Just what do you think should happen in terms of this application and restricting the parking along Outgang Lane?
Well, I think the application, I would personally support approval of the application. Speaking with my sort of son's hat on, there's no issues with it. How the matter of the car parking is dealt with is a matter for highways, and I don't think I have the expertise in that department to look at the best solutions. I just know something needs doing about it before somebody gets hit.
Okay.
And I'm very surprised your ward colleague is not here tonight. I'd expect he might turn up and
He has registered to speak, but is joining us remotely.
I say, fine. Right. I haven't seen that. Good.
I don't see any further questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Which does indeed bring us to our second speaker, who's joining us, all being well, remotely. Councillor Waters. Councillor Waters, can you hear us? Well, you may well be able to hear us, but at this point we can't hear you. Perhaps, Councillor Waters, it may be that you need to unmute, or at the moment we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly, loud and clear.
Right. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I'm speaking tonight to reiterate points raised by Osborwick and Murton Parish Councils when commenting on this application. All of us are supportive of the Shouksmith operation redeveloping its site as a valued long-term local employer. However, it must be emphasised again that the proposed office buildings are too tall and of an appearance totally at odds with the Murton Way rural frontage. The other main concern is, of course, the extra traffic and parking that will be caused both by construction and then the regular operations of the site. The Great Pity Committee hadn't had a site visit when they could have viewed the current chaotic parking situation on Outgang Lane, caused largely by the Gladstone Garage, York, Wolverhampton taxis operation that Planning Committee B created, albeit on the basis of flawed highway development control information. The committee will see that there's a construction traffic management plan within which is the question, where will contractors' vehicles park? Where indeed? Perhaps it needs conditioning that the park and ride site should be considered for use. As for the regular operation of the site, the agenda refers to there being 100 full-time employees and 100 part-time employees on site, but there's only 66 parking spaces provided for employees and visitors. But it doesn't take a genius to work out what's going to happen there. Having engaged with various iterations of these plans, it was pleasing that the landscape architect took on board comments about a native species hedgerow on the Murton Way frontage. On the planning file, the landscape architect is very prescriptive in requiring the centre line of the hedge to be planted 3 foot in from the curb line to give it a proper chance to establish. However, there's no point in taking such care in establishing a hedgerow if it could be kept cut to knee height in the future, which I might add has happened at some other developments. I would hope committee takes the opportunity to seek to add to condition 5 and require that the perimeter hedgerow to Murton Way is maintained to a minimum height of 6 foot when established. The landscape scheme is integral to the amenity of the development, as stated in paragraph 5. Without a condition on the edge height, as was successfully required further up Osborwick Link Road on another development, the real risk is that the hedge will be kept at a low height with little aesthetic or biodiversity value, simply to show off the new office frontage.
30 seconds. Okay, all right. Councillor Pavlovic has a question.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. I just missed, when you said 6 foot, did you say a minimum of 6 foot or maximum of 6 foot?
Minimum 6
Minimum.
foot.
Right.
It's happened before. Probably the classic example is the student flat block, what used to be the whole road dairy site. We were supposed to get a grass frontage with trees, and that was revised down to a hedgerow behind a wall and railings, and every time the hedge becomes visible, it's trimmed down so that you can see advertising signs. You know, these points are important. It's all right insisting that a hedge is planted. It's got to have some protection to allow it to grow.
Councillor Pavlovic and then Councillor Kilbane.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just one other question. You've mentioned the height of the building. From what you understand of the plans, will the existing mature trees be a screen? For
not from the frontage, and the fact that there's how do I put it, an alien appearance of these buildings. They were described in the first planning application as looking like university buildings, and they were actually extolling that virtue. If you know anything about the site, you'll know that there's quite a historical building on the other side of the entrance into Outgang Lane, which is now known as Heritage House. A red brick 2-storey building. This will be totally at odds with anything down there.
Thank you.
Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Waters. Just a couple of questions, Councillor Waters. First of all, I'm assuming that if the condition is put on the hedge, you'd like it to be maintained in that condition in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Second question would be, have ward councillors previously tried to address the problem of parking on Outgang Lane, and if so, what was the outcome?
Well, first of all, we tried to highlight the problem of the parking when the taxi booking office was approved by Planning Committee B. I was very vocal on that. I sent a lot of photographs in, and I was completely and utterly ignored. And that was on the basis of Highways Development Control saying there wasn't an issue with the car parking for the Gladstone Garage York Wolverhampton Taxis operation. And that was based on looking on Google Earth. They hadn't carried out a site visit, and they didn't realise that the car park that you could see on an old Google Earth photograph was before Heritage House took over their car parking and clearly defined it with a boundary fence. That's what I mean when I say that the planning committee were misled by Highways Development Control. I've been on quite a bit between the council and the police, suggesting that they carried out a joint operation. An awful lot of the parking is obstructive parking that's blocking footpaths, damaging parking that's on the little bit of verge that's there. We've also got cars being repaired on the public highway. I once took a photograph of a windscreen being repaired. We've got taxis being serviced on the public highway. So it is possible that the council and council highways, public protection and the police could quite easily carry out a joint operation and sort that parking out. I know what the knee-jerk reaction of a lot of people is, well, we ought to put double yellow line parking restrictions down there. And I would be completely and utterly against that, because all that will do is move the problem away. It will become somebody else's problem. We have 4 or 5 cars associated with Gladstone garage operation that routinely park on Murton Way, causing an obstruction close to the junction with the link road. So it's already spreading the problem. Sorry if I've gone on a bit.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Councillor Waters. Councillor Waters, you and I are aware very much that there is also a very important monument on that junction, which will effectively be opposite the side entrance of this proposed development. Are you aware of any damage that has been caused by cars mounting the curb or parking irregularly? And can you explain to my colleagues what that monument is?
It's the Osborwick and Murton War Memorial. Heritage House, as is now, was the Osborwick and Murton War Memorial Institute and grounds. There were 7 oak trees planted around it to commemorate 7 soldiers that died in the First World War. One of those trees was removed some years ago, and we established the War Memorial and planted another oak tree on that verge to bring it back up to the number of 7. Every year there's a service carried out there, which becomes more and more well attended with every year that passes. Yes, there's damage. There's York Wolverhampton taxis minibus virtually permanently parked on part of the corner. Thankfully, there hasn't been any further ingress with parking on there, although inquiries have been made as to who actually owns the land. Well, it's Council Highways land, thankfully. There was an attempt to establish advertising on that corner, which was removed with local action, shall I say. But yeah, it's a very important corner. I'd like to see, when the Shouksmith site is redeveloped, similar efforts on the opposite corner, certainly with some sensible tree planting. The tree that the council planted a few years ago has failed. So I hope that lets committee know that there is quite a degree of importance to that entrance into Outgang Lane.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, you mentioned briefly objections to the height and appearance of the proposal. Can you just say a little more about that?
Well, it was discussed at both parish council meetings, and it was felt by everybody present at both meetings that we would have much preferred a red brick building to match Heritage House. There was the opportunity to really make a feature out of this in a good way, rather than a feature in an alien way.
And the height?
But like I said at the very outset, both parish councils and both ward councillors are wholly supportive of Shouksmith redeveloping this site, but we were just disappointed with the final appearance.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waters, I don't see any other members with questions, so thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, Chair.
And our third speaker and final speaker, David Shouksmith. Welcome. Yes, just make sure the green light is on the microphone.
Chair, members and officers, many thanks for the opportunity to speak in support of this application. Shouksmith's has been a long-standing family-owned business based in York since 1820. I am proud to say I am now the 7th generation running the business. For a long period of time, we operated out of offices in Micklegate, which we still retain ownership of and rent out as shops, offices and apartments. In 1964, we purchased the land we are looking to attain planning permission on to develop. At the time, there was a small bungalow situated on the land. We then built our current office and moved in September 1966. In 1993, we developed units 1 to 9 on Outgang Lane. These are still retained and owned by Shouksmith Properties, currently rented to numerous businesses. Our current office is a timber frame building which was regarded as a temporary structure when it was originally constructed. The office has served the business well for over 50 years, however, is starting to become extremely dated and is coming to the end of its lifespan. The office and the industrial unit behind are not environmentally friendly and has a very poor energy efficiency rate. In this current climate, we cannot afford to continue to operate buildings such as this. The time has come that we are in a position to be able to redevelop the front of Oswaldwick Industrial Estate to replace our offices and allow the business to progress. We will also make the best use of the land we own on the estate. The redevelopment of the site is firstly to provide a purpose-made head office for J.H. Shouksmith and Sons Limited to progress as a business, creating employment in the city for generations to come. Further industrial units are also proposed, again creating commercial and employment opportunities within an established light industrial park. We've worked hard with the officers to arrive at a mutually acceptable scheme and have addressed all comments, emerging policies during the application process, such that there are no objections from any of the statutory consultees. Indeed, the application has received support from the Economics Growth Team and is presented to you today with officer recommendation to approve. We fully intend to keep ownership of the whole site as we have done for over 50 years, maintaining our strong relationship with both the site and the city as a whole. And it is hoped that the members will support the significant investment proposed and move to approve the application. Thank you again for your time today, and I hope you will agree with the comments made and approve the application.
Thank you. You probably timed that to 3 minutes.
Did I? That's quite good.
Questions from members? Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Shouksmith. Just picking up one of the points that public speaker made about the height of the hedge, the proposed planting setback from the roadside. Do you have any thoughts as to how that will be managed in terms of the suggestion was it should be allowed to establish itself and not be sort of cut down to knee height as soon as it starts growing. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on the comments from the public speaker.
This is our head office, and it's at the start of the business of the industrial estate. There isn't a hedge there at the moment, I don't believe, and I don't think we'd have any objections of having a hedge there.
So I think it was related to his comments about the appearance of the building and potentially some planting sort of softening the impact. So yeah, just wondered if that was something that you'd be happy to consider.
Yeah, we would definitely. Yeah. We also manage the land that we have at the moment, and we have a gardener that comes around and gardens it. So, you know, we can direct that as to how it needs to be.
Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for that. As you've heard from both speakers and both ward councillors, the issue of development is not as great as the issue of the impact of the cars
Mhm.
on the roads and the surrounding areas. Now, it's interesting to hear that you are the owner of the whole site
Mhm.
and therefore presumably the landlord of the businesses whose cars are encroaching on the verges.
No.
No?
No. We own the 9 units that you can see at the back of the industrial estate there, which
Right.
have sufficient parking for all the occupants. We don't park on the roads. They all have designated spaces and there's generally plenty of parking there. Yeah, those 9 units there. The site that we're going to develop, or we want to develop, that we're applying for approval on, we have designed it with sufficient parking to be able to have the units with certain number of parking spaces and the office space with the parking in the middle of it. So we won't be utilising the roads to park on. During construction, we're looking at a phased plan. I know someone mentioned that construction traffic, construction vehicles. I believe the site is big enough for a contractor to allow parking on site.
Right.
So I don't believe that will affect the road either.
Great.
The business that you're talking about, and it frustrates me as well, because they're directly opposite. So it's sort of the silver coloured top building that you can see on the other side of Outgang Lake. Yeah, that one.
That one. Right. Okay.
And that has, I think it's 3 businesses running out of it. Someone's mentioned a taxi business. Someone's mentioned Gladstones. I'm not sure whether it's still called Gladstones, but
Yeah.
Is it still? Yeah. They park all, you see the line of cars in their yard. They
Yeah.
park all down there.
Yeah.
And then it starts at our industrial estate and parks all the way down the left-hand side, my left-hand side, as I'm looking at it, all the way down the road there. And they park on grass verges. We have 2 entrances which are disused, and they generally just park vans, cars all over the place.
So you're going to have to make sure that you can restrict that once you're up in operation.
We've made it so that industrial units are much safer environment for people to walk about in by having an in and an out U-shape, so it will reduce reversing of wagons, lorries, any deliveries down there, and also the existing access we've kept for the offices at the front there, so we won't actually go down Outgang Lane to get to the offices. I believe it's a highways issue, the parking on the road, but this development should not have a detrimental effect on the parking on the road. And it's the businesses, it's that business over there that needs attention.
Could you just amplify a little on that, given the numbers of anticipated employees and the number of parking spaces?
I don't actually have that to hand.
Well, we were hearing, I think, 66 parking spaces, 100 full-time plus part-time workers.
There are a number of full-time members of staff that are indicated.
Sorry, could you just introduce yourself as well?
Sorry, my name's Noel Dobson. I'm with Planning and Design Associates. We're agents that submitted the scheme on behalf of David at Shouksmiths.
Go ahead.
Whilst there are a number of full-time members of staff that are noted that Shouksmiths directly employ, there are a number of site-based staffs that are included that come in periodically, so they're not always in attendance full-time on the office. They'll come in for management meetings or strategic meetings. It also includes the light industrial area to the rear of the site as well. So not all 100 staff are included just for the Shouksmiths development, the office development. It's included for a site-wide employment.
Okay.
So the numbers that have been generated as far as parking numbers, those were done in association with highways and to highways and the highway standards currently.
Sure.
As are the cycling. So we've oversubscribed as well on cycle parking. So we've got oversubscribed on cycle parking and also adequate numbers for car parking.
Councillor De Gorn.
Yeah, just I think there was some reference to you being not that far away from the the park and ride site. I don't know if you've had any discussions with Highways about whether there would be possibility, some arrangement, if you needed more parking than you have on site for staff to make use of that, and maybe car share or things like that, or minibus at set times of day when start of shifts or anything like that, whether that's been
We haven't,
discussed.
no, I'm sure that would be something
It-
that,
Yeah, it would be something that we can consider, definitely.
Okay.
I don't see the parking being a massive issue for the site. As Noel said, a lot of our staff are site-based, a lot of ours are managers, and generally speaking, I mean, you can see at the moment on the photograph there's probably about 10 cars at the front of our office, but we have up to 30 or 35, 40 working out of there. They're generally on sites for, let's say, 80% of the week.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rowley?
Thank you, Chair. David, thank you so much for chatting with us this afternoon. If I could ask Gareth, if you can just get up page 59, please.
Is this a question?
Well, it's a question too.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
But you'd like to bring it up? Okay.
Yeah, because I want to refer to something that's on page
Fine.
59. I want to ask David a question about it.
Sorry, on the presentation.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you, thank you. So at the bottom there, there looks for either sheds or I'm assuming possibly even picnic tables. Can you just confirm what those? There's right 6 of them to the right and 3 of them to the left.
those are picnic tables. So
Thank you,
yeah.
thank you. So that's an open recreational
Yeah,
space.
yeah. To be able to go and sit out.
Would that be exclusively for the use of staff, or would that also be available to local residents if they chose? Because that's quite an important walkway along there. Curious if you feel. That's my first question. Chair.
It was intended just for staff.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And then my second question is in terms of the design of the building, I totally accept that the design is the design. In terms of some of the concerns about how it looks, and I wouldn't necessarily agree with my ward colleague, but that's democracy for you. Would you be open to having a continued dialogue with the ward councillors in terms of as this project develops, just to make sure that there's an open and honest dialogue with the ward councillors and with the parish council? I just want to encourage that.
I mean, well,
I don't see any issues with having an open
obviously
dialogue
one of the
with-
conditions will be to agree materials anyway, so material samples would have to be agreed, so that could be brought into that as a.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pavlovic?
Just a quickie. Although condition 24 says you've got to have a strategy in place for electric vehicle charging, there's no mention in the report that you are actually going to be providing any EV charging points on day one of operation. Are you planning to install any EV charging points?
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
All right,
Yes.
cool. Do you know how many?
That's still to be considered. I actually believe we'll need a high proportion. We now run, I think we've got 4 electric vehicles already running from our office. And in the very near future, we're all going to be doing it. So I will be looking to put quite a few car charging parts. I don't know how many at the moment, but
No.
we
But
definitely
that's part of the strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Mhm.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Kilbane?
Thanks, Chair. And just following up from that, you're in quite a good spot for cycling too, because you've got that, it's a sort of half decent cycling path down the side of the link road, and also you've got the city centre cycle path that runs all the way out to Osbaldwick, and it's quite quiet cycling through Osbaldwick. So, for a lot of people, we don't need the vehicle for the job, then getting there on a bike is probably going to be a good option. In the future, as with electric vehicles, a lot of people are going to be riding electric bikes. have you considered and will you consider wherever you site the cycle stands and then close them and putting charging points in next to them? And when I say charging points, it's essentially a plug socket. Would that be something you could consider?
It's definitely something we can consider. Yeah, even if it's just putting a future provision in for it. I have to admit, I'm not too up on what cycle charging is requirement. Is it just a 3-pin plug? Well, I mean, we are an electrical firm, so you know, putting a I could have that sorted out tomorrow if I really wanted. So yeah, there's no issue with that whatsoever.
Just to come back to that, but yeah, putting the provision in.
Yeah,
Actually,
it would just be an underground duct that you'd put into it, and then you could IP rated sockets.
The 2 cycle stores are concentrated anyway on both sites, the office and the commercial, so that will be fairly easily done because of their location.
Thank you. I don't see any other immediate questions, so I'll take the opportunity. You've heard comments about both the height and design of the proposed building. You've heard suggestions that it could have been designed in such a way perhaps as to reflect rather more the architecture of Heritage House. I'd really be interested to hear your thought processes and how you've come to the conclusion that you have in terms of the scale and design.
Okay.
Well, there are a number of approaches. Obviously, there are a number of different building types in the area. So Heritage House is obviously one. It's set a car park away from the application site. This was a flagship building on a prominent corner. Heritage House been set back in the car park, as it were, not actually on the corner frontage, which is what Shouksmith's office would be. So that we wanted something that would be prominent, visible. And as I said, there are various mix of uses and mix of building styles, shall we say, in and around the area, from residential through to light industrial and obviously Heritage House. So to kind of pick one or other of those is then at odds with any one or other of the others. So as I say, it was to get something that was of a distinguished nature, that was eye-catching, that would act and serve as a flagship building.
Okay.
Which I think we've achieved. Now, the building is also set back from the frontage. As we were talking earlier, there is screening that will occur locally down at ground level to reduce any visual impact from the road. So it isn't a multi-story building. It's only a kind of 2.5-story building, the 3rd story being set back.
Yeah, set back. So the roof pitch is low.
The roof pitch is low, but the roof pitch is also quite a significant feature of the design, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which some might. Yeah, okay. I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, the public participation comes to an end, and it's now up to the committee to have first the opportunity to seek any clarifications or ask questions of officers. I'm sure there'll be questions around highways. And then we'll come to a conclusion. Councillor Eyre.
That's good thing, because mine isn't about highways. So I did note on page 37, paragraph 5.49, the report does reference the candidate sink and what the impact would be on the candidate sink that's in the draft local plan. And does say the draft local plan has significant weight now, gone to full consultation. I was confused therefore why there's no mention in the report from the forward planning team around site ST7 and policy SS9. Which will result in about, I think, about 650 houses being built and accessed on Outgang Lane. It just seemed like quite a relevant thing to be included in the report. May not be, and you may be saying it's completely unaffected, but I wouldn't want to be approving something that killed access to one of the most strategic sites in the city for the next 10 years.
I don't see why it would. It doesn't, the access, one of the accesses shown into that site is, I believe, through this field here. That's the sink.
That green land that's there, that you've highlighted there is marked in the local plan as a sink. which is the one that's referenced in the report, and the line is there that the hedgerow will protect the sink.
So this was in the original version of the local plan, it showed access.
I was having a quick look at SS9. It refers to Outgang Lane as the main access route to the site.
Yes,
So
there was
it
an
will run
alternative to
straight
go
through.
through Outgang Lane, and then there was other access points further north.
But there's no north-south transportation in SS9, so you can't access the south of the site from the north. Policy SS9 states specifically that there is no southern access apart from public transport from Stockton Lane through to the lower half of the site. So those six, and that's the split. That's why my numbers might not be slightly wrong, but there's about 200 houses north and 650 south, and never the twain shall meet, as it were, other than by bus. So the primary access to that site will be straight through what I'm looking at now. It doesn't appear the easiest place to be accessing a large housing site from, and potentially a district shopping centre, and there was talk about secondary school provision as well in terms of that. So that's a lot of us. There is some good cycle infrastructure around there. To Kilbane, the Sustrans route is just off there that you can access in terms of that. But given all the comments we had about issues now with transportation through the site for what's limited use as a commercial, if this is primary access, I would have thought there would have been some assessment somewhere in the report to alleviate my concerns.
Are you asking me a question?
Is there a good reason why that information isn't in the report?
I assume forward planning team have commented that they didn't feel that the two things were unachievable side by side, and the scheme we've got in front of us provides its access points, there are access points existing into the site in very similar locations. It provides for the required number of parking spaces. It over exceeds cycle parking. If an access is taken up Outgang Lane, then it would have always had to live side by side with the pre-existing and potentially proposed new developments. I don't see the two.
Well, so as an example, one of the comments that was made was about visible displays. If there isn't a school on site, those houses people will be cycling to Archbishop Holgate School and will have to turn right out of Outgang Lane, looking past a 3-storey building. Therefore, the height of the building has a more significant issue on that than it would if there wasn't 650 houses further north.
It's really well set back. So if you are cycling, you're at this point here. I can't see that that's going to impact on sightlines. You see that what we call it, cutaway there is presumably follows a highway sightline across the corner of the site. But I don't think the building itself is going to be an obstruction to visibility.
Just to follow on that particular train of thought, on the detail here, as far as I'm aware, there maybe is there a footway across the frontage, but there's no segregated cycle provision. Is there scope for an LTM 120 compliant provision across there if this is subsequently become a strategic site? Because I'm aware, obviously approaching, as has been said, from the west, then you're not really want to go for that very short section of busy road from the link road round the corner onto Murton Way, if we could provide something. So I'm obviously not asking whether the developer should provide that, but I'm just asking, is there sufficient space left to provide that at some future date if that is necessary to provide sustainable travel access to Outgang Lane?
Presumably you'd lose the verge, wouldn't you? I'd imagine. So that's probably as good a photograph as you get, because there's no,
I should be asking, has our highways or forward plan team looked at it? Because it doesn't sound like they have.
well, I think I think you're probably, in terms of the allocated site, I think you're ahead of the game. I'm not aware of any discussions with potential developers that have gone into that level of detail. I know there are discussions about how to provide the southern access, but I'm not aware of the endpoint of that. Say the original iteration of the proposals map showed it going through the sink.
I suppose the second point, which follows on from Councillor Ayres' question, is the width of Outgang Lane. I mean, given the numbers of households it was referring to, is that wide enough now for two-way traffic through this area of the site, through this part of the estate? Is it currently wide enough for two-way traffic, not regarding parking, but without consideration of parking? Is it wide enough for two-way traffic?
Yes, yeah. I
Okay.
think there's a photograph further down, the width of Outgang there. There it is.
And the footway on one side is quite tight, isn't it? Okay. Thank you.
Is it supplementary?
It is to that, sorry. Just for members, on that particular slide that's on the screen at the moment, the war memorial, as you will see, is on the right-hand side. And those birdmouth fencing that's been put around it have been damaged a few times, which is why I was trying to ask my colleague to clarify that. So that's how close that is. So in terms of any widening of that road in the future, that would be quite restrictive, and there'd be a tremendous amount of objection, given that that's the only war memorial we have in the village.
Yeah, so these are rather outside the scope of this particular application in my view.
That was my point, Chair. Can we stick to this application rather than trying to plan for when the housing estate is built?
We are wandering, Chair.
Well, you may
into
say that, but I think
extraordinarily extensive discussion of highways issues. It seems to me if there are highways issues, they've got to be addressed separately and somewhere else. It doesn't seem to me that it relates to this particular site, quite frankly.
Councillor Pavlovic.
Councillor Looker, as always, gets there ahead of me. To what extent is the parking carnage that seems to be a feature, a planning consideration for this application?
Introduce yourself.
Sorry, it's Ian Stokes, Principal Highway Control Engineer, Development Control Engineer on the planning side. This application meets its requirement for car parking and it exceeds its requirement for cycle parking. So in itself, it has no contribution to the parking issues on Outgang Lane.
Would it impact on construction, for example, construction vehicles being able to access the site, which might be a planning consideration?
There is a condition for a construction traffic management plan which requests routing of vehicles, and one of the speakers has already alluded to the fact that there would be capacity on the phased development of this site to accommodate construction vehicles and contractors' vehicles. So I see no issue in itself other than ongoing parking issues, potentially creating a narrow width of road for the construction vehicles to come into. But that issue itself is outside the planning considerations for this development. We have to consider what the impact of this development is alone. And there are other teams within highways which would look at the enforcement or other issues on Outgang Lane due to vehicles parking on the highway.
Great.
And on the verge.
So can I then just confirm and just to clarify with Gareth, as the planning officer involved in this, we cannot take those traffic issues, those parking issues into account when considering this application.
I'd say the pre-existing traffic conditions, and this, all things being equal, this site manages its own
Great.
traffic and access. So I don't think we'd
So
be reasonable
hopefully
to
end
try
of
and-
discussion there.
Councillor,
Yeah, the question wasn't about pre-existing traffic. The question was whether, if this application was in conflict to policy SS9 in the draft local plan, whether that would be a material consideration. And as page 37 says, significant weight to policies where, quote, minor or inconsequential changes. So policy SS9 in the draft local plan has significant weight. If this is in conflict with that, what are the consequences of that? And also,
Councillor, would you
yes, in my
just,
opinion, it is, but
would you just make it a little clearer for members what that conflict might be? Councillor,
in terms of, because a policy SS9 states direct access to the site through here. Therefore, any application that would impinge on SS9, the ability to deliver SS9 would be in conflict with the draft local plan. We have identified this site for housing, and this is the access route for housing. Therefore, there needs to be any policy that would impinge upon that one. And the policy does specifically say not the sink. So our draft local plan says this road will be the access for those houses. That has to surely be a material consideration as a policy. If someone was putting an application across the middle of the road and saying, well, close the road, and everybody was happy with it, I don't think we'd be approving it because it's in conflict with policy SS9. So the question was, how much weight does policy SS9 have? And reassurance that it doesn't conflict with SS9.
Councillor Kilbane, I will come to you, Councillor Hollier.
In what way is this application in conflict with SS9? In what way does that development, as planned, impinge upon that access years before applications have even gone in for it?
What's land usage?
In what way is it in conflict?
If you have to compulsory purchase a land to be able to put the sustainable transport thing, so you can't when you just built a site on it.
Supplementary, Chair. So my supplementary, and I absolutely concede the point, but is not one of the fundamentals of planning committee is that you consider each site on its merits, not where it fits. And this is a conversation we've had on numerous other schemes when we've said, have you not taken the quantum of everything that's planned in the local plan as having traffic normally impact? And we've been told quite categorically, no, you must consider this application in and of itself, and you cannot take other potential developments into consideration. I think we're straying on very dangerous ground here, Nigel, if we go down the path that I think you're alluding to.
Chair, can
We
I
will
move?
we will return to this.
We abandon this discussion now and let's move into decide whether we want to propose or oppose. If we don't like the application, let's oppose it.
Thank you, Councillor Luca. I did promise Councillor Hollier that I would give him his question, and he hasn't asked it yet.
Thanks, Chair. It was just in terms of the current situation in terms of changes of use from offices to residential. And particularly in terms of the new builds side of things. And if it is possible to, at some point in the future, I appreciate there's no immediate perhaps intention, but whether that could be, you know, those permitted rights could be removed if they exist.
When the office to residential conversion permitted development right was introduced, it did have a cut-off a date, 2013 springs to mind. Whereas the PD right would only apply to buildings built before that date. When it was made permanent, I don't know if that has been carried forward. I can't answer the question. if it's an issue that members wish to be covered out in any condition, I think I would suggest deferring that to myself, chair and vice chair, to look into it and see whether it would be caught by the PD right or not.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, in general, I don't think that should be something that should be permitted anywhere anyway. So I'd suggest it on this site, as much as anywhere
Okay.
else, I guess.
You may, if you will, bring that into our discussion. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to ask Gareth a little bit about the height of the building. From the report and the pictures, it's very difficult to get a comparison with other buildings in the area, and I've always been kind of advised and guided when it comes to planning and height restrictions. Obviously, that the heights of adjoining or adjacent buildings is kind of the place that you go to. This seems to be very high compared to the buildings around it, and whilst I have genuine sympathy for the application and for this, I'm just slightly concerned about its height. So can you just let us know where it sits in terms of buildings around it? Are there any other buildings around it that are of that height or not? I'm just curious.
As far as I'm aware, the nearest 3-story is which way to go? This way. So the nearest 3-story are these residential blocks here. I think I have a photograph of them in the distance. Yeah, so you can just see them. Just see them there. A 3-story residential is normally not as high as 3-story commercial, although my measurements of the plans are that this is a maximum of about 10 meters to the ridge. Yeah, so there probably isn't a great deal of difference between the ridge height of the residential building there and the ridge height of what's proposed. But as for the industrial estate, just go back up to that. I'm not aware that there are structures on there, the concrete batching plant, for example, which will be reasonably significant. But in terms of buildings, most of the buildings are 2-story in height. Similarly, the commercial along the link road, there are 2-story and 2-story in scale, even when they're ostensibly single-story commercial buildings.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. So again, from my local knowledge, this will be significantly higher than any other building in the area, and I guess my slight reservation is that if we're going to use and again, I want to assure my colleagues across the other side that I'm not dwelling into areas that we shouldn't be dwelling into. But in terms of future applications that may come before a planning committee, if this were permitted at the height that it's requesting, in a sense, we're setting the benchmark for future developments to effectively turn around and say we can build that high. So my reservation is about the height, but is it enough? I don't know. But thank you for answering my question.
Okay. Have we exhausted the questions to officers? Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks, Chair. Just a brief question for Gareth. Obviously, we should be looking to approve officers in the central area first, but the report's saying that we've only got a vacancy rate of about 4.3% or something, I think. Can you, it might not be a question you can answer now, but this flagged up some concerns for me, this report, in terms of the lack of availability of A-grade office space in the city centre. So it would be good to know how much space we've got and potentially do have for officers in the city centre, aside from the York Central developments sort of now. It's not in the report, and I don't expect you to know it off the top of your head, but if you can provide me with an answer in sort of roughly square meterage of office space we currently have available in the city centre, that would be really useful.
Yeah, I can't answer that now. I think we know the answer, or colleagues at Make It York know the answer, or an economic development know the answer. it's that there's a limited availability, which is why partially why the sequential test comes to the answer that it's going to, both in terms of the office use outside the city centre and also the sequential test for flood uses. We didn't identify anything which was considered to be sequentially preferable.
Councillor de Goy?
Yeah, well, this going back to the sort of parking, just looking to see whether we can include, if this is to be approved, can we condition parking protection of the visibility displays for the two entrances, except that you can't expect the applicant to deal with the other issues, but obviously in terms of safe access and egress from the premises, there needs to be clear line of sight from those two entrances that are going to be created as part of the development. So there's one on, is it Murton Way, and then one on Outgang Lane?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the visibility space to me appears. So I was looking.
Okay.
I'm talking about, obviously, visibility displays fine across the grass verge, but if there's a line of parked cars along the road, that won't help there. Or more likely commercial vehicles. No, that you need to actually ensure there's nothing parked at the mouth of that access point. Don't you? Yeah, I think the only thing we can do with that is introduce WLIs, parking restrictions. Yeah, that's right. We figure that.
Can you comment, please?
It may be possible that TRO could be introduced to put no waiting restrictions to provide a visibility display past parked vehicles, but generally visibility displays are measured from an access point to the carriageway curb edge. So a parked vehicle is outside what would be a measured visibility display.
So you're suggesting that it's acceptable to allow continued parking to create problems for the new occupants of this site? Is that what you're saying?
I'm informing you that the guidance for when you calculate a visibility display is measured to the back edge of the carriageway, i.e. the curb line. And yes, parked vehicles do cause a problem with that. If you're looking to remove parked vehicles, then it is another measure. It is a regulation order to prevent parking rather than a visibility display calculation.
Sorry, that's what I'm proposing is W lines to ensure that that any vehicles emerging from that point can safely see along that outgoing lane or on the main road.
So need to be sure that it was necessary and reasonable to impose such a condition, because the condition would effectively.
From the applicant, the problem with parking all the way along Outgang Lane at the moment. So
I'm just setting out the what you have to consider when putting on your conditions.
Okay.
And the condition would effectively prevent the development without the TRO and without the lines. So that's a factor for you to consider, because TROs are outside of the planning process, so they have to go through their own process of publicity and decision making.
Okay, I think. Are you?
No, it's not a question, it's moving to recommendation.
You're moving to recommendation.
Okay.
You weren't making a proposal.
No, I'm going to make a proposal.
Go on then,
if you
Councillor.
ask me. Thank you. This has been one of the more bizarre planning hearings that I've sat through, and I've sat through some quite bizarre ones. I cannot see where the objections to things that are outside of the planning process that we've never been allowed to consider before, and that aren't in the gift of the applicant, seem to be being used by some members of the committee as reasons to try to find for refusal. So I am going to say, I propose recommendation of supporting the recommendation from the officers to approve, with the additional condition that the planning officer raised in respect of the hedge, the existing heritage hedge or well-established hedge, to be protected in during the construction period and in the perpetuity of the life of the development.
Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, more than happy to support the officer recommendation. I think the applicant said in designing this building, they do want to make a statement, and I think it does, and I think it's personally find it a visually attractive building. It's in an area with a very mixed array of light industrial, some residential nearby. It's not as though there is a particular style that this would shatter the consistency of. In terms of there are clearly issues in the area with parking not associated with this site. I'm assured from what the applicant said that the activities on the site will not further exacerbate those issues. Clearly those issues do need attention, but that's not within the gift of this applicant, nor would it, I don't think, be appropriate to condition double yellow lines, because we can't do that through a condition. There is a process through which ward councillors can object to any yellow lines being put in any place, but which is as it should be. That's the whole point of the process. I think this is a laudable application. I'm more than happy to support it.
Councillor Hollier.
Well, just to request again, I guess, that delegation to officers in terms of the potential future conversion of the building, just to cover off that point.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming they're at the debate section now.
Yes.
In terms of just having my say, as it were, I have made it very clear, as does my ward colleague in the public participation, that we value our relationship with Shouksmith. We support the application for this site to be redeveloped. I am saddened at the height. I'm also saddened that there has been little or no discussion with the parish council or with the ward councillors in terms of this development. And as I requested of the applicant in the public participation, that dialogue should happen moving forward. I think it is a well thought out application in terms of its design. I think in terms of the dare I say the parking, I think that the applicant has done everything you would expect and more to try and alleviate the parking issues that are currently happening on outgang lanes that are they're not of their making at all. And I think they have to be applauded for trying to address that with this application. And so I will be supporting this application with those reservations that I've already made. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Eyre.
It will surprise nobody. My view will be slightly contrary. I think it was disappointing we didn't have the information, and I take Councillor Pavlovic's point, as I always do, but the key difference is we have a local plan now, Councillor Pavlovic, and that land is allocated significant weight, as the report says quite categorically. The point of having that local plan is to set the strategic sites, set the access routes, and be sure that we can deliver those strategic sites. SS9 and compliance with SS9 is probably one of the most significant issues that will affect this particular area of the city going forward. Not getting it right now at any point will have huge impact, that was alluded to already at the meeting. Potential loss of a sink next to the site if the access route has to be put through there. Potential loss of extra greenbelt land not allocated in the local plan to allow eastern or northern access through the site. All I asked for was an assurance that policy SS9 had been given the significant weight that the report says that the local plan should be given, had been considered, and none of those issues were material to this particular thing. That wasn't there, unfortunately. The information wasn't there. Therefore, I don't feel I can make the decision. And just to give some indications, SS9 says associated improvements and upgrades to all of the junctions will be required. Significant upgrades to the carriageway footpath width, condition and streetscape may be required. All of that work is required on that particular area, and we haven't assessed how that will be delivered and what impact this application will have on any of that. So while I 100% support the application, without the information that that has been considered and isn't going to become an issue down the line with the local plan, I can't support it, so I will be abstaining.
Bear with me. Councillor de Gorne.
Yes, I firstly want to say I acknowledge the procedural points that have been made by the colleagues about W other lines. I think technically what I should have been proposing was that a contribution towards the costs of that process. Accept that process has to be followed. So I just want to put that straight. I think I do want to acknowledge that the benefits of this development in terms of local employment and the efforts that the developers have put into thinking about the transport implications are to be commended. I personally would have liked to see a little bit more in terms of going beyond thinking about the cycle provision within the site. That's always a key element of a new development, but we also need to, there's no point in having that if as soon as they turn out of a site, they're mixing with heavy goods vehicles, which a lot of the case will be in this particular location. So, work with the local authority on suitable connections to the cycle network would be appreciated, even if it's not in the plan as it stands. I do think that the parking issues on Outgang Lane are something that will have to be addressed, and unfortunately, even if they're not of their making, will impact on the applicant, and therefore the local authority will have to work with them to try and resolve those issues. But overall, I don't have a problem with the applicant as it stands. I do also acknowledge the points that Councillor Eyre has made, that it is unfortunate if our forward plan team have not sort of given sufficient weight to that in terms of the consideration of this application. It may well be that having done that, we would still have a recommendation for approval, but without that information, we can't really make a decision on that basis.
Okay, but Councillor de Gorne, you weren't suggesting any additional conditions, or you made comments about.
Well, the only
funding, but
about
to make that up on
bound to Councillor Eyre's greater expertise on the local plan, but I would have thought that whatever elements need to be taken into account, whether we can ask for that to be looked at by the chair and vice chair to make sure that there aren't any sort of minor adjustments that might need to be made to take account of this potential outgoing lane being potentially the main access route to this strategic site.
Okay. Any other contributions? Okay, Councillor Pavlovic, you've proposed that we accept the officer's recommendation to approve with the additional condition as was indicated at the beginning. I don't think we've identified any further conditions.
Well, councillor
Apart from
Holly
the-
flagged up, yeah.
Apart from the removal of permitted development rights with respect to this proposed development. Does that cover it? And if it does, do I have a seconder?
You did, councillor Fenton.
Councillor Fenton, second. So, just so we're 100% clear what we're voting on, would you please just summarise for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So it's the recommendation, conditions in the report, recommendation to approve an additional condition regarding hedge protection. And in terms of the permitted development right issues, you're delegating to officers to look into that issue, decide whether a condition removing office to residential permitted development rights is necessary. And I'll report that back to Chair and Vice Chair. And we will either have a condition or we won't, depending on the wording of the order.
Okay. Can I ask then, those who are in favour of approval on that basis? Will be recorded. Thank you. And those against? And those who are abstaining? Thank you. That is approved. Thank you. We only have one other item on our agenda, so I don't think we need to take a break at this point. Do you need to take a break? We've only got, I think you're okay. All right, good. Before we do move on, though, I think we're all concerned to hear Councillor Ayres' comments there, and I hope that planning officers will take note that we ensure that issues which are raised by the local plan are fully taken into account when assessing any applications.
That's noted. We did have comments from the forward planning team and they didn't raise it as an issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Cheers.
So would you like to introduce our final item on the appeals?
Sure. So this is our supposedly quarterly report on appeals performance, planning appeals performance against refusals of planning permission or conditions imposed on planning applications. We're playing a bit of a game of catch up. We fell behind, so there's another. You will notice there's another report already on next week's subcommittee behind the Times Planning Committee B agenda. Just for members to note and ask any questions if you see fit.
Any questions? Councillor Cobain?
Thanks, Gareth. Can I just the last quarter here is to June 22 on page 65.
Yeah, that's why we're playing catch up. So the one on the agenda next week is up to September. Then we'll run one which goes to the end of the year 2022, and then we should be back where we normally are. This is always a reporting lag when we get to where to get the information.
Councillor?
Just a quick clarity then. Paragraph 5, is that from July 2021 to June 2022?
Yes. Yes,
Unless
it
time is
is.
rotating backwards.
If only we could.
Councillor Cobain?
I need to draw attention to the fact really that in that quarter to June 22, we did lose more than the council lost more than it won in terms of the appeals being allowed. Do we know what the underlying reason is for that?
No, they. So in in the assessments, sorry, the summaries. So page 71 to 74. There isn't really anything that strikes me as being, and certainly in the ones that were allowed, there's nothing that strikes me as being something where we would have made, even with the benefit of hindsight, we would have made a different decision. There was the overturned recommendation on Frederick House, I believe. But it's it's a big percentage from a small number, which sometimes raises alarm bells. Using an example on page 72, the Cromer Street house and multiple occupation. We normally win appeals on HMOs when the threshold has already been breached, and in this case, we didn't. The inspector thought that there should be more flexibility on that. So we lost that one where we would normally expect to win it, but this wasn't challengeable through the courts, for example. We do tend to, and also on 73, the Hendon Garth application seemed a bit lax in our. We've always been quite successful in using our household design guide SPD. This scheme was contrary to it, but the inspector felt that it was still acceptable. So it's one of those things as a matter of judgment. But we do look at these. We do discuss the ones we lose, and we do try and where there's a need to try and so learn lessons for the future, really.
That brings us to the end of our agenda. The meeting is closed. Thank you. Okay.